Deep in the heart of the Utah desert, far from prying eyes, sits a military installation so vast and so secretive that it makes Area 51 look like a tourist attraction. Dugway Proving Ground covers over 800,000 acres of desolate salt flats and mountain ranges, an area nearly the size of Rhode Island. Established in 1942 during the height of World War II, its original purpose was to test biological and chemical weapons that could turn the tide of war. But unlike Area 51, which has become a pop culture phenomenon, Dugway operates in near-total obscurity. The few roads leading in are heavily guarded. The airspace above is permanently restricted, and what happens inside those fences has terrified whistleblowers and researchers for decades. The story of Dugway Proving Ground begins in the desperate early days of World War II. In 1942, the United States military needed a remote, uninhabited location to develop and test weapons that were too dangerous for any populated area. The barren salt flats of Utah's Great Basin were selected precisely because nothing lived there. No towns, no farms, barely any vegetation. Under the direction of the U.S. Army Chemical Warfare Service, Dugway became the nation's primary testing ground for chemical and biological agents. Scientists detonated mustard gas shells across the open desert. They constructed replica German and Japanese villages, complete with authentic furniture, and firebombed them to test incendiary weapons. The architect behind the Japanese village replicas was none other than the famous set designer from Standard Oil, commissioned to make the destruction as realistic as possible. As the Cold War escalated, Dugway's mission expanded dramatically under the oversight of the Department of Defense. The facility became America's frontline laboratory in the shadowy world of biological warfare research. Scientists at Dugway conducted hundreds of open-air tests, releasing deadly pathogens and chemical agents into the atmosphere to study how they dispersed across terrain. These weren't small-scale experiments. Entire grids spanning miles of desert were blanketed with agents like VX nerve gas, sarin, and weaponized biological simulants. Much of this testing was conducted under Project 112, a classified Pentagon program designed to assess America's vulnerability to biological and chemical attack. The soldiers and civilian workers involved were often given minimal protective equipment. Many were told nothing about the substances swirling invisibly around them. On March 13, 1968, the veil of secrecy surrounding Dugway was violently torn open by an incident that shocked the nation. In what became known as the Skull Valley sheep kill, over 6,000 sheep grazing in Skull Valley, just miles from Dugway's perimeter, suddenly dropped dead. Ranchers discovered their flocks convulsing, foaming at the mouth, and collapsing in grotesque piles across the valley floor. The Army initially denied any connection to their testing activities, but independent investigators quickly discovered that Dugway had conducted an open-air test of VX nerve agent just the day before. A wind shift had carried the lethal chemical compound far beyond the testing range and directly into the grazing lands. The incident became a national scandal and a turning point in America's relationship with chemical weapons. The Skull Valley disaster forced the hand of President Richard Nixon. Under enormous public pressure, Nixon signed Executive Order 11850 in 1969, officially renouncing America's offensive biological weapons program. The following year, the United States signed the Biological Weapons Convention, pledging never again to develop or stockpile biological agents for warfare. Dugway's most controversial programs were supposedly shut down. Chemical weapons stockpiles were ordered destroyed. The Army claimed the facility would shift to purely defensive research, testing protective equipment, decontamination methods, and threat detection systems. But skeptics weren't convinced. The problem with Dugway was that everything happened behind closed doors. Defensive research and offensive research often look identical from the outside, and the classified nature of the work meant no independent verification was possible. One of the darkest chapters connected to Dugway involves Project SHAD, an acronym for Shipboard Hazard and Defense. Conducted between 1962 and 1973, Project SHAD was a series of secret tests in which the Department of Defense exposed American military personnel to chemical and biological agents without their knowledge or consent. Thousands of sailors, soldiers, and airmen were used as unwitting test subjects. Some tests occurred at sea, others on land, including at Dugway Proving Ground. The agents used ranged from relatively benign simulants to dangerous substances like sarin and VX. For decades, the Pentagon denied Project SHAD ever existed. It wasn't until 2000, when investigative journalists and veterans advocacy groups forced a congressional inquiry, that the horrifying truth finally came to light. The comparisons between Dugway Proving Ground and Area 51 are not just rhetorical. They are structural. Both facilities are located in remote desert environments, surrounded by vast buffer zones of restricted land. Both operate under some of the highest security classifications in the United States military. Both have restricted airspace that is actively patrolled, and both have been the subject of persistent reports of unidentified aerial phenomena. Locals in the small towns surrounding Dugway, places like Toole and Grantsville, have reported strange lights in the sky for decades, unusual aircraft performing impossible maneuvers, sudden military convoy activity in the dead of night. The Army has never addressed these reports. Some researchers believe Dugway serves as a secondary testing facility for advanced aerospace technology, the same kind of work that made Area 51 famous. On January 26, 2011, the world got a rare and terrifying glimpse behind Dugway's walls. The entire installation was placed on emergency lockdown. No one in, no one out. Over 1,000 military personnel and civilian contractors were trapped inside for nearly 12 hours. Families waiting outside the gates were given no information. The Army's official explanation, when it finally came, was chilling. A small vial of VX nerve agent had gone missing from one of the laboratories. VX is one of the deadliest substances ever created. A single drop absorbed through the skin can kill an adult human in minutes. The lockdown was lifted only after the vial was reportedly found in a laboratory. But many questioned how a substance that lethal could simply go missing in a facility supposedly governed by the strictest security protocols on Earth. Just 4 years later, in 2015, Dugway Proving Ground found itself at the center of an even more alarming scandal. A Pentagon investigation revealed that the facility had accidentally shipped live anthrax samples to 194 laboratories across the United States and to labs in 9 foreign countries, including South Korea, the United Kingdom, and Australia. The shipments had occurred over the course of a full decade, from 2005 to 2015. Dugway's scientists had been tasked with irradiating anthrax spores to render them inert before shipping, but the sterilization process had failed repeatedly. Living, viable anthrax had been packaged and mailed through standard shipping channels for 10 years. The CDC launched an emergency investigation. The revelation raised terrifying questions about biosecurity protocols at America's most sensitive facilities. Former Dugway employees who have spoken out, always anonymously, always at great personal risk, paint a picture of a facility that operates with minimal external oversight. One former contractor, interviewed by journalist David Phillips of the New York Times, described a culture of corner-cutting and bureaucratic negligence that persisted for years. Safety protocols were sometimes ignored to meet testing deadlines. Equipment was outdated. Younger staff were often poorly trained in handling the most dangerous substances on Earth. The Government Accountability Office has repeatedly flagged Dugway for security deficiencies, but meaningful reform has been slow. Critics argue that the facility benefits from its obscurity. Without the public attention that Area 51 receives, there is little political pressure to demand accountability. What you don't know about can't embarrass you. In recent years, satellite imagery has revealed significant new construction activity at Dugway Proving Ground. Researchers analyzing images from commercial satellites have identified new buildings, expanded testing ranges, and what appear to be advanced detection arrays. In 2019, the facility received a major funding increase from the Department of Defense, earmarked for what was described as next-generation biological threat detection research. Some analysts believe Dugway is being quietly expanded to become the primary hub for America's biodefense research, a role previously shared with Fort Detrick in Maryland and the Edgewood Chemical Biological Center. The timing is significant. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, global interest in biological weapons and pandemic preparedness has surged. Dugway, hidden in the Utah desert, may be more important now than at any point in its history. So what is really happening at Dugway Proving Ground today? The honest answer is that we don't fully know. And that's precisely the problem. Here is a facility that has accidentally released nerve agents that killed thousands of animals, that shipped live anthrax for a decade without noticing, that lost track of VX nerve agent inside its own walls, that experimented on American soldiers without their consent. And yet it continues to operate with less public scrutiny than almost any other government facility of its size. Dugway Proving Ground is not a relic of the Cold War. It is a living, expanding, heavily funded operation at the cutting edge of biological and chemical research. The question isn't whether secrets are being kept behind those desert fences. The question is how many and how dangerous those secrets truly are. The truth about Dugway Proving Ground has been buried beneath decades of classification stamps and desert sand, a facility larger than some states, testing the deadliest substances known to mankind. And we're told not to worry. If this investigation opened your eyes, hit that like button and help more people discover what's hidden in the Utah desert. Subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive, because the next revelation might be the one they never wanted you to see.